The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the grand ballroom as my wife Madison accepted another man's marriage proposal on stage. The crowd erupted in applause while I stood frozen, watching my 20-year marriage dissolve in front of 300 corporate executives. "Ladies and gentlemen," David Cross, CEO of Pinnacle Software, boomed into the microphone, his arm wrapped possessively around my wife's waist. "Madison has finally agreed to dump her deadbeat husband and marry a real man." The laughter that followed hit me like a physical blow. I'm Alan Foster, 42 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought I was attending my wife's company Christmas gala as her supportive husband. Turns out, I was the evening's entertainment. Madison, stunning in her red designer gown, leaned into the microphone. "Alan's been holding me back for years. It's time I upgraded to someone who can actually provide for me." Her voice carried that practiced corporate confidence I'd fallen in love with decades ago, now turned into a weapon aimed directly at my heart. I scanned the crowd, looking for a friendly face, someone who might share my shock at this public humiliation. Instead, I found Madison's inner circle, Jessica, Tanya, and Priya, raising their glasses in celebration. Jessica caught my eye and smirked. "Poor Alan," she stage-whispered to Tanya, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "At least now he can code himself a new personality." The jokes kept coming. Someone shouted, "Maybe he can debug his love life." Another voice added, "Time to update his relationship status to permanently single." My hands clenched into fists as the crowd's laughter washed over me. These people, Madison's colleagues, our supposed friends, were treating my devastation like dinner theater. David pulled Madison closer, his weathered face smug with victory. "Don't worry, folks," David continued, playing to his audience. "I'll make sure Madison gets the luxury she deserves. No more shopping at discount stores or driving economy cars. She's moving up to the penthouse level now. The penthouse level. My penthouse. The one I'd bought with the proceeds from selling my IT company 5 years ago. The company that had made me wealthy enough to support Madison's career ambitions, her designer wardrobe, her expensive hobbies. I backed toward the exit, my face burning with embarrassment. A waiter offered me a napkin for the champagne stain on my tuxedo, his expression pitying. Even the help felt sorry for me. "Alan," Madison's voice called out as I reached the ballroom doors. "Don't leave angry." This is better for both of us. I turned back one last time. She stood on that stage like a queen addressing her subjects, David's arm still around her waist, the spotlight making her diamond earrings, the ones I'd bought for our anniversary, sparkle like stars. "You're right, Madison," I called back, my voice surprisingly steady. "This is exactly what both of us deserve." The crowd quieted, perhaps expecting a dramatic scene or breakdown. Instead, I smiled, a genuine smile that seemed to unnerve Madison more than tears would have. "Enjoy your upgrade," I added, then walked out into the Chicago winter night. The valet brought my car around, a modest BMW that suddenly felt like a chariot of freedom. As I drove through the snowy streets toward my penthouse, my phone began buzzing with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, social media alerts. The humiliation was already going viral. But as I pulled into my building's garage, I wasn't thinking about embarrassment anymore. I was thinking about numbers. Specifically, the numbers in our joint investment accounts, the ones Madison had never bothered to understand. The ones that showed I wasn't just the majority stakeholder in our marriage. I was the majority stakeholder in David Cross's company. I rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, my mind already calculating. Madison wanted an upgrade. David wanted to play with the big boys. They were about to learn that in the game of corporate warfare, the quiet guy in the corner often holds all the winning cards. My penthouse felt different as I entered, cleaner somehow, like a weight had been lifted. I loosened my tie, poured myself a scotch, and settled in front of my wall of monitors. Time to see exactly how much my deadbeat status was worth on the open market. The first call went to my banker. Jim, it's Alan Foster. I need to liquidate everything. Tonight. Everything? Alan, that's $357 million across multiple accounts. Are you sure? Sure. And Jim, I need you to execute the stock sales first thing Monday morning. All of my Pinnacle software holdings. There was a pause. Alan, that's 60% of the company. If you dump that much stock at once, the price will crash. I know. I took a sip of scotch, savoring the burn. That's exactly what I want. As I hung up, my phone exploded with incoming calls. Madison's name flashed on the screen repeatedly, followed by David's, then numbers I didn't recognize. Word was already spreading through Chicago's corporate network that something big was happening. I let them all go to voicemail and opened my laptop. Time to do what I did best, write some code. Not for a program this time, but for revenge. A systematic, methodical dismantling of everything Madison and David thought they'd won tonight. The knock on my door came at exactly midnight. I checked the security monitor and saw Madison standing in the hallway, still in her red gown, her makeup smeared from crying. David lurked behind her, his confident swagger replaced by nervous energy. I opened the door and leaned against the frame, blocking their entry. "Hello, darling," I said, my voice pleasant and calm. "How was the rest of your engagement party?" Madison pushed past me into the penthouse, her heels clicking frantically on the hardwood floors. David followed, his eyes darting around the space like he was cataloging assets. "Alan, what the hell did you do?" Madison spun to face me, her composure cracking. "My phone hasn't stopped ringing. David's investors are panicking." I closed the door slowly, deliberately. I withdrew my money. Isn't that what deadbeat husbands do? Make poor financial decisions? "Don't play dumb," David snapped, stepping forward. "You know exactly what you've done. 60% of Pinnacle's stock hitting the market Monday morning will destroy the company." "Will it?" I moved to my bar cart, pouring another scotch. "I wouldn't know. I'm just a washed-up programmer, remember?" Madison's face had gone pale beneath her foundation. "Alan, you can't do this. We can work something out. The gala was just corporate theater. You know how these events are. Corporate theater." I nodded thoughtfully. "Is that what we're calling adultery now?" How modern. David's jaw tightened. "Look, Foster, I'll buy you out. Name your price. We can make this go away quietly." "With what money?" I settled into my leather chair, gesturing at my wall of monitors. According to these real-time market indicators, Pinnacle's pre-market trading is already down 30%. By Monday close, you'll be lucky if the company's worth enough to buy a decent used car. The truth was sinking in. Madison sank onto my couch, her red dress pooling around her like spilled wine. "You're destroying everything I've worked for." "No, sweetheart. I'm just stopping my financial support of it." I pulled up a spreadsheet on my main monitor. "Would you like to see the numbers? 20 years of marriage, and you never once asked about our finances. Probably should have." David moved closer to the screen, his face growing ashen as he read. "This can't be right. You're telling me you've been funding my company's expansion for the past 3 years? Not just funding it, owning it." I highlighted a section of the spreadsheet. Every major investment round, every acquisition, every expansion into new markets, I was the silent partner making it possible. Madison kept pushing me to invest in her company, said it would be good for her career advancement. Madison's voice came out as a whisper. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't. You were too busy planning your upgrade." I stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of Chicago's skyline. "You know what the funny thing is? I actually loved you. Even tonight, when you humiliated me in front of all those people, part of me hoped it was some kind of misunderstanding." My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled. "Oh, this is interesting. That's from Tony, the doorman at your building, Madison. He says you and David have been meeting there 3 nights a week for the past 6 months. He's got security footage. David's face flushed red. You've been spying on us? Tony's a friend. Turns out, people notice when the CEO starts making regular visits to an employee's apartment. He thought I should know. I turned back to them. He also mentioned the shouting matches you two have been having. Something about Madison wanting David to leave his wife and David stalling? Madison buried her face in her hands. Alan, please, we can fix this. Fix what? Your affair? Your public humiliation of me? Or the fact that you've been systematically planning to leave me while spending my money to fund your lover's business? I moved back to my desk, pulling up another screen. Because according to these bank records, you've been moving money from our joint accounts to a private account I'm not supposed to know about. Planning your exit strategy? The silence stretched between us. Outside, snow continued to fall over the city, each flake illuminated by the building's lights. It was beautiful and peaceful, the opposite of the chaos unfolding in my living room. David finally spoke. What do you want? Want? I laughed, genuinely amused. David, I think you're misunderstanding the situation. This isn't a negotiation, this is consequences. My phone rang. Jim, my banker. Alan, I've got some news. The preliminary market response to tomorrow's stock dump is significant. We're looking at a complete collapse of Pinnacle's stock price. But there's something else. What's that? I've been getting calls from Pinnacle's board members. Apparently, there are some irregularities in the company's financial reports. Missing funds, unauthorized expenditures. They want to meet with you as the majority shareholder. I glanced at David, whose face had gone white. Irregularities? Looks like someone's been using company funds for personal expenses. Luxury travel, expensive gifts, that sort of thing. The board is calling for a full audit. Thanks, Jim. Set up that meeting. I hung up and looked at David with renewed interest. So, in addition to sleeping with my wife, you've been embezzling from the company I've been funding. This keeps getting better. Madison stood up abruptly. I'm leaving. This is insane. Good idea, I agreed. But Madison? You might want to find somewhere other than your apartment to stay. I own that building too. Bought it as an investment property last year. I'll be serving you an eviction notice tomorrow. She stared at me in shock. You can't do that. Actually, I can. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you actually read the contracts you're signing. I moved to the door, opening it for them. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a busy day tomorrow. Lots of revenge to plan. David grabbed Madison's arm, pulling her toward the exit. At the doorway, he turned back to me. This isn't over, Foster. You're absolutely right, I replied. It's just getting started. After they left, I poured myself another scotch and settled back into my chair. The city sparkled below me, full of possibilities. Tomorrow, I would begin systematically dismantling everything Madison and David had built on my foundation. But tonight, for the first time in months, I was going to sleep peacefully. Monday morning arrived with fresh snow and fresh possibilities. I'd spent the weekend preparing, and now it was time to execute Phase 2 of what I'd started calling Operation Upgrade. My first stop was Rick's office. Rick Martinez had been my best friend since college, and after 20 years as a Chicago police detective, he'd gone private. His investigative firm occupied a modest space in the Loop, but Rick's reputation for finding dirt was legendary. Jesus, Alan, Rick said, reviewing the file I'd brought him. Madison really went nuclear on you, didn't she? Public humiliation tends to focus the mind, I replied, settling into the worn leather chair across from his desk. What can you find on David Cross? Rick's weathered face broke into a grin. Already started digging after you called yesterday. This guy's got more skeletons than a Halloween store. He opened his laptop. 3 previous marriages, all ending in messy divorces. 2 intimate harassment settlements his company paid out quietly. And get this, he's been cooking the books at Pinnacle for at least 2 years. How bad? Bad enough that when the SEC gets wind of it, he's looking at federal charges. Rick pulled up a spreadsheet. Phantom employees, inflated contracts, kickbacks from vendors. Your wife picked a real winner. I studied the numbers, my programmer's brain automatically organizing the data into patterns. This is perfect. What about Madison's inner circle? The ones who were laughing at me Saturday night? Jessica Hartwell, Tanya Morrison, and Priya Patel. Rick flipped through a stack of photos. All three knew about the affair. In fact, they've been covering for Madison for months. Jessica even provided alibis for Madison's business trips with David. Business trips, 5-star resorts, luxury spas, that weekend in Napa last month. Rick handed me a photo of Madison and David at a restaurant, clearly intimate. They weren't exactly subtle about it. My phone buzzed with a text from Tony, the doorman. David's car is in Madison's garage again. Want me to do anything? I showed the message to Rick, who chuckled. Tony's a good asset. Used to work security before the doorman gig. He knows how to handle himself. Perfect. I typed back to Tony. Yes. Time for David's car to get an upgrade. An hour later, Tony sent me a video. David's pristine Tesla Model S now sported bumper stickers reading, "I cheat on my wife," and "honk if you're sleeping with your employee." The interior was filled with dog food, and someone had written "Homewrecker" in washable paint across the windshield. Subtle, Rick commented, watching the video over my shoulder. We're just getting started. My next stop was Pinnacle Software's headquarters. As the majority shareholder, I had every right to attend the emergency board meeting David had called to address the stock crisis. I arrived early, taking a seat at the head of the conference table, a power move that wasn't lost on the other board members. David walked in 10 minutes late, his usual swagger replaced by nervous energy. He'd clearly had a rough morning dealing with his car situation. His eyes widened when he saw me. Alan, I didn't expect you here. Really? The majority shareholder of a company in crisis, and you didn't think I'd show up? I gestured to the empty chair across from me. Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss. The other board members, 5 corporate veterans who'd been rubber stamping David's decisions for years, suddenly looked very interested in their notepads. Gentlemen, I began, pulling out a thick folder. I think we need to address some irregularities in the company's financial management. For the next hour, I methodically presented evidence of David's embezzlement, his fraudulent expense reports, and his misuse of company resources. The board members' expressions grew increasingly grim as the scope of David's misconduct became clear. This is preposterous, David sputtered. Alan's just angry about personal matters. He's trying to sabotage the company out of spite. Personal matters? I raised an eyebrow. You mean like your affair with my wife? The one you announced publicly at Saturday's gala? I turned to the board. Gentlemen, did any of you know that Mr. Cross has been using company funds to finance his extramarital relationship? Hotels, restaurants, gifts, all charged to Pinnacle's accounts. The silence was deafening. Finally, board member Robert Chen spoke up. David, is this true? David's face had gone red. It's not what it looks like. Those were legitimate business expenses. Business expenses? I pulled out another document. This receipt from Tiffany and Company for a $20,000 necklace. What business purpose did that serve? The meeting ended with David being placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. As the board members filed out, David cornered me in the hallway. You think you're so smart, he hissed. But Madison loves me. She chose me over you. Did she? I pulled out my phone, showing him a series of text messages. These are from Madison's phone to Jessica last week. She's been planning to dump you as soon as you divorced your wife and gave her access to your assets. Apparently, she called you a useful stepping stone to something better. David stared at the messages, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally, devastation. How did you get these? Madison uses the same password for everything. Our anniversary date. Ironic, isn't it? That evening I met Rick at O'Malley's, a cop bar where he was still treated like royalty. We settled into a corner booth with our beers, and Rick filled me in on the day's developments. David's wife filed for divorce this afternoon, Rick reported. Apparently someone sent her copies of all those hotel receipts and photos of David with Madison. She's going for everything: house, cars, his investment portfolio. Someone? I smiled innocently. Yeah, someone. Same someone who tipped off the Chicago Tribune about David's suspension from Pinnacle. The story's running tomorrow morning. I raised my beer in a toast. To upgrades. To upgrades, Rick agreed. But Alan, you know this is just the beginning, right? Madison's not going to take this lying down. As if summoned by his words, my phone buzzed with a call from Madison. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker. Alan, you bastard, I know what you're doing. You think you can destroy my life because you're hurt? Well, two can play this game. I've got lawyers, and I've got friends, and I'm going to make you pay for this. You're going to regret the day you decided to mess with me. Rick whistled low. She sounds pissed. Good, I replied, finishing my beer. Angry people make mistakes. And I'm counting on Madison making a lot of them. The Chicago Tribune's front page Tuesday morning was everything I'd hoped for. Tech CEO suspended amid embezzlement allegations. The article detailed David's affair, his misuse of company funds, and the ongoing investigation into Pinnacle Software's financial irregularities. By 9 a.m., the story had been picked up by every major business publication in the country. I was enjoying my coffee and the morning's coverage when my building's concierge called. Mr. Foster, there's a group of people here demanding to see you. They say they're reporters. Send them away. No comments. Yes, sir. Oh, and Mr. Foster. There's also a woman here claiming to be your wife. She's quite agitated. I checked my security monitors and saw Madison in the lobby, gesticulating wildly at the concierge while a small crowd of reporters filmed her meltdown. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and she was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. Tell security to escort her out. She doesn't live here anymore. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Jessica Hartwell, Madison's closest friend and biggest enabler. Alan, you need to stop this madness. Madison is falling apart. Jessica, how nice to hear from you. I was just thinking about our conversation Saturday night. Something about me needing to code myself a new personality. How's that working out for you? There was a pause. Look, I know we were harsh, but harsh? I interrupted. You publicly humiliated me at what I thought was a company Christmas party. You laughed while my wife announced she was leaving me for her boss. You made jokes about my career, my finances, my worth as a human being. We were drunk. It was just party talk. Party talk. I pulled up Rick's file on Jessica. Speaking of talk, how's your husband handling the news about your affair with that client from Morrison and Associates? The line ended. I smiled and moved on to the next phase of my plan. Pinnacle Software's offices were in chaos when I arrived. Employees clustered in groups, whispering about the morning's news. Security guards flanked the elevators, and several people I didn't recognize, probably lawyers or investigators, moved through the hallways with grim efficiency. I found Madison in her office, frantically packing her belongings into boxes. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red-rimmed and furious. Come to gloat? She spat. Actually, I came to help. I pulled out a folded paper. Eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate the apartment. Madison snatched the paper, scanning it quickly. You can't do this. I have rights. You have the rights outlined in your lease agreement, which, coincidentally, I wrote. I sat down in her visitor chair, making myself comfortable. Did you know that adultery is considered a breach of the moral character clause in your lease? I can have you out by the end of the week. You're destroying everything I've worked for. No, Madison. I'm just stopping my subsidy of your lifestyle. I gestured around her office. This job, this company, your salary, it all exists because of my investment. David's embezzlement just gave me the legal cover I needed to clean house. She threw a stapler at me, which I easily dodged. 20 years of marriage, and this is how you treat me? 20 years of marriage, and this is how you treated me. I stood up. But don't worry. I'm sure David will take care of you. Oh, wait. He's about to lose everything, too. I left Madison to her packing and headed to the executive conference room, where the board was meeting with federal investigators. As the majority shareholder, I had every right to participate in discussions about the company's future. The lead investigator, Agent Sarah Mitchell, was thorough and professional. She walked us through the evidence they'd gathered: falsified expense reports, phantom consulting contracts, and a complex scheme to funnel company money into David's personal accounts. Mr. Foster, Agent Mitchell said, your decision to liquidate your stock holdings actually helped us identify the scope of the fraud. The financial pressure forced Mr. Cross to accelerate his embezzlement, which made the pattern more obvious. Happy to help, I replied. What's the timeline for charges? We'll be filing federal indictments within the week. Mr. Cross is looking at significant prison time. After the meeting, I walked through Pinnacle's offices one last time. Employees avoided eye contact, probably unsure whether I was their savior or destroyer. In truth, I was both. The company would survive, I'd make sure of that, but it would be rebuilt from the ground up, with new leadership and a new culture. My phone buzzed with a text from Tony. Madison's friends are at her apartment. Looks like an intervention. Perfect timing. I drove to Madison's building and used my master key to access the security office. The building's surveillance system gave me audio and video of Madison's apartment, and what I saw was better than anything I could have planned. Jessica, Tanya, and Priya sat around Madison's kitchen table like a tribunal. Madison was crying, her face blotchy and swollen. You have to understand, Tanya was saying. We can't be associated with this scandal. Our careers are at stake. My career is destroyed, Madison sobbed. Alan has ruined everything. Alan didn't make you have an affair, Priya pointed out coldly. Alan didn't make you humiliate him publicly. You did this to yourself. Jessica leaned forward. Madison, we've been friends for years, but this is bigger than friendship. David's going to prison, the company's in ruins, and frankly, you're toxic right now. So, you're abandoning me? We're protecting ourselves, Jessica replied. Something you should have thought about before you decided to blow up your life. I recorded the entire conversation, then sent copies to Madison's phone with a simple message. These are your real friends. That evening, Rick and I met at my penthouse to plan the next phase. The city stretched out below us, lights twinkling like stars. David's lawyer called, Rick reported. He wants to make a deal. Full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. What about Madison? She's been calling everyone she knows, trying to find a job. No one's returning her calls. Rick pulled out his phone. But there's something else. I've been monitoring her communications, and she's planning something. He showed me a series of text messages between Madison and someone named Kay Shaw, her lawyer. She's going to try to claim you're mentally unstable, Rick explained. Says the stress of the divorce has made you dangerous. She wants to get a restraining order and challenge your financial decisions as the product of a mental breakdown. I laughed, genuinely amused. Let her try. I've got 20 years of medical records showing perfect mental health. Plus, every move I've made has been completely legal and rational. That's not the point, Rick said seriously. She's desperate, and desperate people do stupid things. You need to be careful. As if summoned by his warning, my building's security system chimed. Someone was trying to override the elevator to reach my floor. I checked the monitors and saw David Cross in the lobby, his face twisted with rage. This should be interesting, I murmured, buzzing him up. David burst through my door like a man possessed. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes had the wild look of someone who'd lost everything. "You destroyed my life," he snarled, advancing toward me. Rick stepped between us, his hand moving instinctively to where his service weapon used to be. "Easy there, big guy." 20 years building that company," David continued, ignoring Rick. 20 years of work, and you destroyed it in a weekend." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied calmly. "I just stopped funding your embezzlement." David swung at me, a clumsy haymaker that Rick easily intercepted. In one smooth motion, Rick had David face down on my coffee table, his arm twisted behind his back. "Assault," Rick said conversationally. "In front of a witness. That's going to look great at your sentencing hearing." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "David, you're trespassing in my home and threatening violence. Would you like to make a statement for the record?" David struggled against Rick's hold. "I'll kill you, Foster. I'll destroy everything you care about." "Terroristic threats," Rick added. "We're really racking up the charges here." I called building security, and within minutes, David was being escorted out in handcuffs. The police would charge him with assault, trespassing, and making terroristic threats, more ammunition for the federal prosecutors. As the door closed behind them, Rick shook his head. "These people really don't understand the game they're playing, do they?" "No," I agreed, "but they're about to learn." Wednesday morning brought news that David Cross had been arrested at his home on federal embezzlement charges. The FBI raid was captured by news helicopters, and the footage of David being led away in handcuffs played on every local station. His bail was set at $5 million, money he no longer had access to. Madison's situation was equally dire. The eviction notice I'd served was just the beginning. As the owner of her apartment building, I had every right to terminate her lease for cause. Her affair with David, conducted partially on the premises, violated the building's moral character clause. But I wasn't content with simple eviction. I wanted complete social destruction. My first stop was Elite Fitness, the upscale gym where Chicago's corporate elite worked out. David had been a regular there for years, using his membership to network and show off. I joined the previous month, knowing this day would come. The boxing ring at Elite was reserved for serious fighters, but money talks. I'd arranged for a private session with Tommy Kowalski, a former Golden Gloves champion who now trained corporate executives in the sweet science of boxing. David arrived at his usual time, 6 a.m., probably thinking physical exertion would help him deal with his legal troubles. He stopped short when he saw me in the ring, wearing boxing gloves and protective gear. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded. "Working out," I replied, bouncing lightly on my toes. "Tommy here was just teaching me some basics. Want to spar?" David's face flushed red. "You think this is a joke? My life is ruined because of you." "Your life is ruined because you're a thief and an adulterer," I corrected. "But hey, if you want to work out your frustrations, step into the ring." Tommy looked between us nervously. "Gentlemen, maybe we should—" "It's fine, Tommy," I said. "David and I just need to settle some things man to man." David climbed into the ring, his movements clumsy with rage. Tommy reluctantly fitted him with gloves and headgear, muttering about liability insurance. 3 rounds, I suggested. "Winner takes all." "What's all?" David asked. "If you win, I'll consider dropping the charges against you. If I win, you publicly apologize for sleeping with my wife." David's eyes lit up with desperate hope. Deal. What David didn't know was that I'd been training with Tommy for 3 months, ever since I'd first suspected Madison's affair. While David had been spending his evenings with my wife, I'd been learning how to throw a proper jab. The first round was brutal. David came at me like a wild man, throwing haymakers with no technique or strategy. I danced around him, landing sharp jabs to his face and body, letting him exhaust himself against my defense. By the second round, David was breathing heavily, his expensive workout clothes soaked with sweat. I stepped up the pressure, working his body with combinations that Tommy had drilled into me. David's guard dropped, and I landed a clean shot to his solar plexus that doubled him over. The third round was a massacre. David could barely lift his arms, and I methodically picked him apart with precise shots to his head and body. When Tommy finally stopped the fight, David was slumped against the ropes, blood trickling from his nose. "Looks like I win," I said, pulling off my gloves. "I'll expect that public apology by the end of the day." David glared at me through swollen eyes. "Go to hell." "Already been there?" I replied. It was called being married to Madison. I left David in the ring and headed to the locker room, where several other gym members had gathered to watch the spectacle. Word would spread quickly through Chicago's corporate community. The quiet programmer had beaten the arrogant CEO senseless. My phone buzzed with a text from Rick. "Madison's at the Tribune building. Looks like she's trying to tell her side of the story." Perfect. Phase 2 was about to begin. I arrived at the Tribune just as Madison was leaving the building, her face flushed with what looked like victory. She spotted me across the street and marched over, her heels clicking on the pavement. "I just gave them an exclusive interview," she announced triumphantly, "about your mental breakdown, your obsessive behavior, your threats of violence. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know what kind of man you really are." "Interesting," I replied, pulling out my phone. "Did you mention this to the reporter?" I played the recording I'd made of her conversation with her friends the previous day, the one where they'd abandoned her because she was toxic. Madison's face went white. "Where did you get that?" "Or this one?" I played another recording, this one of Madison on the phone with David's wife, trying to convince her not to divorce David because it would complicate things. "You're recording me illegally." "Actually, Illinois is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's perfectly legal." I smiled. "And since I own your apartment building, I have the right to monitor communications on the premises for security purposes. It's all in the lease you never bothered to read." Madison stared at me in horror as the implications sank in. "You've been recording everything." "Everything," I confirmed. "Your phone calls with David planning your affair. Your conversations with your friends about how to humiliate me. Your meetings with lawyers about how to steal my assets. All of it." I pulled up another file on my phone. "This one's my favorite. It's from last month, when you and David were planning how to have me committed to a psychiatric facility so you could take control of my finances. Very touching, really. Nothing says true love like conspiracy to commit fraud." Madison's legs seemed to give out. She sat down heavily on a nearby bench, her face in her hands. "Why are you doing this to me?" she whispered. "Because you destroyed 20 years of marriage for a man who's going to prison," I replied. "Because you humiliated me in front of 300 people. Because you tried to steal everything I've worked for. But mostly because you never once in all of this showed even a moment of remorse." I sat down next to her, my voice softening slightly. "Madison, if you had come to me privately, told me you were unhappy, asked for a divorce, I would have been hurt, but I would have been fair. We could have split everything 50-50 and gone our separate ways with some dignity intact." She looked up at me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "It's too late now, isn't it?" "Much too late," I agreed. "You chose to make this a war. Now you get to live with the consequences." I stood up and started to walk away, then turned back. "Oh, and Madison? You might want to call the Tribune and retract that interview. Because if they publish lies about my mental health, I'll sue them for defamation. And I'll make sure they know exactly where those lies came from." That evening, Rick and I met at O'Malley's to celebrate the day's victories. The bar was crowded with off-duty cops and firefighters, the kind of blue-collar crowd that had no patience for corporate drama. "David's lawyer called again," Rick reported over his beer. "Apparently David's having second thoughts about going to trial. The assault charges from last night combined with the federal embezzlement case have him looking at serious prison time." "How serious?" 15 to 20 years if he's convicted on all counts." Rick grinned. Turns out threatening to kill the star witness against you isn't great legal strategy. My phone buzzed with a notification from the Tribune. Madison had indeed retracted her interview, citing emotional distress and incomplete information. The paper wouldn't be running her story. What about Madison? I asked. She's broke, unemployed, and facing eviction. Her friends have cut her off, David's going to prison, and her reputation in Chicago's corporate world is destroyed. Rick raised his beer. I'd say your revenge is pretty much complete. Not quite, I replied. There's still one more thing I need to do. Rick raised an eyebrow. What's that? I smiled and pulled out my phone, showing him an invitation I'd been working on. I'm throwing a party. The invitation was elegant in its simplicity. Alan Foster cordially invites you to celebrate new beginnings. Cocktails and revelations at the Penthouse. Saturday, 8 p.m. Dress code, honest. I sent it to everyone who had attended Madison's company gala, all 300 guests who had witnessed my public humiliation. The RSVPs came flooding in within hours. Chicago's corporate elite loved a good scandal, and they sensed this would be the social event of the season. Madison, of course, wasn't invited, but I knew she'd come anyway. Saturday evening arrived with a fresh snowfall that turned the city into a winter wonderland. My penthouse had been transformed into the perfect venue for what I was calling my honesty gala. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while a string quartet played softly in the corner. The guests arrived fashionably late, their faces bright with curiosity and anticipation. These were the same people who had laughed at my humiliation a week ago, and now they were eager to see how the story would end. Jessica, Tanya, and Priya arrived together, their expressions nervous but defiant. They'd lost their friend Madison, but they still had their careers and reputations to protect. Alan, Jessica approached me with a forced smile. Lovely party, very mysterious. Thank you for coming, I replied graciously. I know it must be difficult, given recent events. Tanya stepped forward. We want you to know that we never meant any harm. The things we said at the gala were just party talk. Party talk, I nodded. Yes, you mentioned that when you called. How's your husband handling your affair, by the way? Tanya's face went white. Around us, conversations began to quiet as people sensed drama unfolding. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. Of course you don't. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the room's sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. The room fell silent except for the soft clink of champagne glasses. Thank you all for coming tonight. A week ago, many of you were at another party, Madison's company gala. You witnessed what I thought was the worst moment of my life, my wife publicly leaving me for her boss. I paused, letting that sink in. Tonight I'd like to share with you what I've learned since then. I pressed play on my phone, and Madison's voice filled the room. Alan's been holding me back for years. It's time I upgraded to someone who can actually provide for me. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Most of them remembered those words from the gala. That was my wife of 20 years, I continued, announcing her affair with David Cross, CEO of Pinnacle Software. What she didn't know, what none of you knew, was that I was the majority shareholder in David's company. I was the one providing for her, funding her lifestyle and making her career possible. I played another recording, this one of David announcing our divorce to thunderous applause. David Cross is currently in federal prison, awaiting trial for embezzling over $2 million from the company I was funding. He used my money to finance his affair with my wife. The room was silent now. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. But tonight isn't about David or Madison, I continued. Tonight is about honesty, about the difference between friends and spectators, about the people who stand with you when you're down and the people who laugh at your pain. I gestured to Jessica, Tanya, and Priya. These three ladies were Madison's closest friends. They knew about her affair for months. They helped her cover it up, provided alibis for her secret trips, and encouraged her betrayal. And when I was humiliated at the gala, they led the laughter. Jessica tried to speak, but I held up my hand. Jessica, would you like to explain to your husband why you've been meeting with Robert Chen from Morrison and Associates at the Fairmont Hotel every Thursday afternoon for the past 3 months? Jessica's face crumpled. Across the room, I saw her husband's expression change from confusion to understanding to rage. Tanya, perhaps you'd like to tell everyone about the kickback scheme you've been running with your vendor contracts. The FBI is very interested in those irregularities. Tanya began to cry, her mascara running down her cheeks. And Priya, I'm sure your board of directors would love to know about the insider trading you've been conducting through your brother's investment firm. Priya turned and ran for the elevator, pushing through the crowd of stunned guests. You see, I continued, my voice calm and reasonable, when someone betrays you, it's important to understand who else was involved. Madison didn't destroy our marriage alone. She had help. That's when the elevator doors opened and Madison stepped out. She looked terrible, her hair unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her face gaunt from stress and sleepless nights. But her eyes burned with desperate fury. You bastard, she screamed, pushing through the crowd toward me. You've destroyed everything, my job, my friends, my life. The guests backed away, forming a circle around us like spectators at a prize fight. I destroyed nothing, I replied calmly. I simply stopped subsidizing your betrayal. Madison swung at me, her nails aimed at my face. I caught her wrist easily, holding her at arm's length. Madison, you're trespassing. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is my home too, she shrieked. No, it's not. It never was. The deed is in my name only, purchased with money from the company I built before we were married. I released her wrist. You were a guest here. A guest who forgot her manners. Madison looked around the room, searching for a sympathetic face. She found none. These people had come to see a show, and she was providing it. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking. Alan, please. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Can't we work this out? For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. This broken woman bore little resemblance to the confident executive who had humiliated me a week ago. Madison, I said gently, do you remember what you said when I asked you to reconsider? When I begged you not to destroy our marriage in front of all these people? She nodded, tears streaming down her face. You said it was better for both of us. You said I deserved exactly what I was getting. I gestured to the room full of witnesses. Well, now, you're getting exactly what you deserve. Madison collapsed to her knees, sobbing. The sound echoed through the silent penthouse. I turned to address my guests one final time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I hope you've learned something tonight about the price of betrayal, the value of loyalty, and the importance of reading the fine print before you laugh at someone else's pain. Security guards, the same ones who had escorted David out earlier in the week, moved forward to help Madison to her feet. Mrs. Foster, one of them said gently, we need to escort you out now. Madison looked back at me one last time as they led her to the elevator. I loved you, she whispered. No, I replied. You loved what I could provide. You just never bothered to find out what that was. The elevator doors closed, and Madison was gone. The party continued for another hour, but the mood had changed. People spoke in hushed tones, processing what they had witnessed. Several guests approached me to apologize for their behavior at the gala, suddenly realizing they might have misjudged the quiet programmer in the corner. As the last guest departed, I stood alone in my penthouse, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city sparkled below me, full of possibilities and new beginnings. My phone buzzed with a text from Rick. David pled guilty to all charges. 20-year sentence. Madison's been committed to a psychiatric facility for evaluation. I poured myself a scotch and settled into my favorite chair. Tomorrow, I would begin rebuilding Pinnacle software with honest leadership and ethical practices. I would use my wealth to create something positive, something that would help people rather than exploit them. But tonight, I would simply enjoy the silence of a life finally free from betrayal. Justice, I reflected, wasn't always swift. But when it came, it was thorough.